Hey y'all, and welcome back, or if you're new around here, hello and welcome. My name is Katie Marie, and in today's video I'm sharing with you guys my top 10 palettes for fall. So these are my autumn inspired palettes out of my collection, and they are just top 10, some of my favorite palettes when it comes to fall themed type of palettes. And per usual, if you're new around here, I like to do these every single year, and before I do these, I'll sit down and watch my previous year's video to see if any of those palettes that I mentioned previously in that video still hold true and still like reign supreme over all the new palettes I've tried from the year. So I have some older palettes that are still holding on. It's still fantastic autumn and fall inspired palettes to me personally when it comes to the type of fall palettes that I like. They still hold true, and then I've also have a ton of new ones which I'm super excited to see. Like, so many awesome palettes have been coming out recently that just speak to the autumn lover in me, the fall lover in me. So we got a lot of palettes to talk about, 10 in total, and I am going to be doing this video a little bit differently because when I rewatched my video I realized I did top 10 and I shared new and old palettes, but then I also went on and had an honorable mention where I shared all my favorite autumn palettes that were discontinued or no longer available, and there were a lot of palettes. So I was like, you know what, let's make that a whole video in and of itself. So if you like this type of video and if you'd like to see palettes you can no longer get but I have in my collection that I think are fantastic and gorgeous type of fall autumn inspired palettes, such as right behind me, stay tuned for that video. I'll share it in a week or two. I'll try to get it up relatively quickly, but let's go ahead and jump right into palettes that you still can purchase. They're still available right now and they all just scream fall to me. Let's go ahead and start with the older palettes. I have 4 that are still holding true that I mentioned last year, but the first one I wanted to show is from Kailav Beauty, the Van Gogh palette. They released this when they were Musée Beauty. They are now Kailav Beauty, and you can still pick this up on their website if you're at all curious to try out this palette or if you like this color story, but I absolutely love this color story. It is such a gorgeous palette, and the looks that I created with this were so very just kind of fall-esque to me. I love these kind of tones, especially when it comes to the mustards, but even the dark blue and the green and the brown all had that kind of grunge, that little bit, I don't know, just that had that depth to it that when I created eye looks, they all just kind of had that fall-esque vibe to them, and it's just such a great palette. Like I said, I mentioned it last year because it was such a fantastic palette. I loved it so much, and when I was thinking over my palettes, I was like, oh yeah, it's still a really great palette. I still really do like it. So definitely did want to mention it as one of my top 10. It's just such a great palette. The formula is so nice. If you never tried Kailav Beauty, highly recommend them. The shimmer formula is very easy to work with and very beautiful to apply. Nothing crazy like metallic or like insanely sparkly, but they're very nice shimmers that lay down, they stay in place, you don't have to worry about them moving around, and then the mattes are just a dream to work with. Okay, not sure if I was able to edit it out or not, but I got interrupted at the end of sharing this palette. I don't remember what I was saying, but I was basically wrapping it up. It's a great palette. Anyway, the next palette that I mentioned last year was from Menagerie Cosmerics Killer Purr. Now I do know they are taking this off right now. They're discontinuing it, but they're bringing it back. They're still keeping Killer Purr. I think they're going to remove one of the mattes and replace it with a shimmer, and they're changing the shimmers. But as far as I know, that's all they're doing. I don't think they're like reformulating or making it an entirely different color story. It's still going to be called Killer Purr. So as far as I know, even if you can't purchase it right now, you will still be able to purchase this palette. It's just going to be a teeny bit different with the shimmers. So I'm still including it in this video because it is a beautiful, gorgeous, kind of neutral fall-esque type of palette that I think back on fondly so very much. It's a palette that I just, like I said, I loved playing with. I had a great time. I love creating all matte looks, and the type of all matte looks that I could get with this color story was so much fun. It's so me and just so fall-esque. So definitely had to keep this one in my top 10 when it comes to fall palettes. And then the formula-wise, some of my favorite mattes are in this palette for sure. Don't like the shimmers at all, so I'm happy that they're reformulating, and I'm curious to see what the new palette will be like and the new shimmers will be like. But the mattes totally made up for the fact that I hated the shimmers, because the mattes, I still love this palette and still think back on it so very fondly, so definitely a great palette to have. Then we have the Nomad America's Parks palette. This palette right here I mentioned last year. It was relatively new, I'm pretty sure when I mentioned it, because it hasn't been out too long. But this palette is a colorful type of autumn palette that I had just so much fun with. It's got a gorgeous array of colors, some a little bit more bright maybe than what you would consider for autumn. Still, when you pair these all together, the type of looks that I was getting with this palette did really remind me of more autumn type, especially with these darker tones up there. The purple is absolutely beautiful. So many gorgeous bronzy, you know, goldy type of shades in here, the red and all that. I thought it was a gorgeous palette, and it was one of those palettes that made me think of fall, so that's why I'm keeping it in my top 10 for fall. It's a gorgeous formula, gorgeous, you know, with both mattes and shimmers. shimmers. I absolutely love Nomad's mattes. They are outstanding, but the shimmers are also too fantastic. There's some marbled in here that I wasn't really sure if I would like them, but I really did end up enjoying them. And overall, just a fantastic array of colors for that very kind of nature-esque type fall vibe. So definitely wanted to keep it in my top 10 for fall. And then last up for the older palettes that I mentioned last year, this is going to be the Made by Mitchell Feet on the Ground palette. This monster of a palette, it's so very large, but this palette right here definitely still makes me think of fall. You got all those kind of green tones, but also beyond the greeny tones, you have those darker tones with the browns and even the cool tone grays and grungy greens. You have a purple in there, and those are the type of tones, at least this shade of purple, I should say, not every shade of purple, but there's that depth with the shades of purple and bronze and burgundy that really makes me think of autumn tones and whatnot. So I wanted to keep this in my top 10 for sure. There's a little bit of pops of color, but if you really cover those maybe really bright pops of color, I still think it's an autumn palette, and the type of looks that I was getting with this, I could go very, very bright, but I could definitely get some really fantastic autumn or fall type of eye looks, so had to keep this one in. It's a nice formula. It's been ages since I've used this, but it's got a really nice soft formula when it comes to the mattes. The shimmers I remember not being crazy about, but they were fine to use. They didn't give me any issues as far as like picking them up and putting them on, but they were just kind of like, they're whatever. But the mattes I remember being very, very nice to work with in here. So keeping this in my top 10. All right, let's segue into the new palettes that I've tried over the past year, and the rest are new palettes. So I've tried a bunch of new palettes that I am excited to share with you guys. Let's start with the smaller palettes. The first one I'm going to share is the Colored Raine Secret Garden palette. This palette is obviously a very fall-ish type of palette. It's very, grungy, very gardeny and grungy, but still the colors, maybe if you covered this one, it's a little bit bright, but even then, there's some bright tones when it comes to fall. If you ever see, like, we would go to Tennessee in the fall, and all the colors in the leaves, some of them were just so very bright. So this palette kind of encompasses like what you see. You see the really dark, green trees that are still, the green leaves that are still standing, but then you see the ones that are more dying, but then you see the ones that are also turned bright colors and whatnot. So this palette just as a whole reminds me of the varying shades that you can see as the trees are starting to turn in Tennessee and whatnot. So this palette is just that palette that I'm like, yes, that is a fall palette. That just screams like leaves that are changing on the trees, and I just love it. The matte formula is fantastic. I just recently reviewed this, so I don't want to go on too long because I'm sure you guys are tired of hearing me talk about it, but the formula is so nice. It's beautiful, it's pigmented, it's blendable, it's lovely. It's an all matte palette, so you don't have to worry about mattes in here, and I didn't have a single one that was like, that one wasn't fun to work with. They all were fantastic, so pigmented and so smooth. So definitely a favorite that I tried not too long ago, and definitely a fantastic option for fall. Let's go ahead and just mention the other Colored Raine palette. This is the Queen Bee palette, and this one is more of the brighter tones when it comes to fall, but still you got depth there. You have a black, but the red and the yellow and the orangey tones, when you combine them all together, the looks that I was getting when I was using this palette really did make me think of fall, and especially this shade, this shimmer, Mind Your Business, is a more of a duochrome type of shifty shadow, so it's absolutely gorgeous. Has a little bit of like green in there along with the bronzy tones. It's beautiful, it's shifty, it's stunning on your eyes, and yeah, the looks that I was getting, yes, very honey, very bee-esque, but also very fallish for me. I love these type of tones when it comes to the fall and the type of looks that I like to wear as the weather's like getting a little bit chilly and whatnot, and it just, as a whole, just makes me think of the fall, so I had to include it in my top 10 for fall. And then the formula, kind of just like with the Secret Garden, the mattes are absolutely beautiful. The black is so very pigmented, it's amazing, and the shimmers are very nice. They're very smooth, they're very sparkly when you put it on. They do transfer up into my brows during the day, so something to keep in mind, but super sparkly, super smooth to go on. Got a lot of intensity, a lot of beautiful sparkle as you turn your head, and it's a really nice formula. I do like it. So as a whole, this is another fantastic palette that I definitely highly recommend for fall, and again, it's another palette that I recently reviewed, so if you want to see any of the looks that I created with this, or even the Secret Garden one, because those are both I reviewed in the same video, check out this video right here. It's my Palette Palooza review for, I guess I posted the beginning of October, but anyway, I reviewed both of them and shared all the looks that I created with the palette, so if you need some inspiration, check out that video. Next up, this is going to be the Shroud Cosmetics and BattyBean HalloBean palette. Now I know my review video on this wasn't like super glowing, but it wasn't really had anything to do with the quality of the palette. It had more to do with like the inspiration, I guess you could say, for it, and also in comparison with her first palette that she did in collaboration with Shroud Cosmetics. But as a whole, when I look at this palette and I think of fall, it definitely can give me one or two fall looks that I absolutely love, so I wanted to go ahead and include it in my video. Yes, it's not the most inspiring and the colors are a little bit, I don't know, I struggle to get looks that I really love in it. But like I said, I can go to a very fall look that I absolutely love using the oranges in here, maybe a little pop of green, but using these more orangey tones with the dark green in the corner. Gorgeous fall look. So I did want to include this because if you want a good quality shadow, if you want to find an indie brand that has great quality matte eyeshadows and you like this color story, I can definitely recommend. The mattes in here are absolutely beautiful, and the shimmers too, not to say that the shimmers are bad. The shimmers too, Shroud Cosmetics shimmers are very nice. They're very pigmented, but they still have tons of sparkle in them. They're very easy to apply. You don't have to like fight with it or use your finger. I can use a brush with these every single time, and I love that because some sparkly, really beautiful sparkly shadows don't want to be picked up with a brush and you like have to use your finger, and I don't like getting my finger dirty. So I love that I can apply these with a brush, and they are insanely sparkly. This one is a multi-chrome because it's like green on the side. It's got gold in there and obviously purple and whatnot. Absolutely beautiful. So a very nice formula all around. And a really great color story if you're wanting to get some fall looks. And as I've been using this palette more, I've been, incorporating it in her first palette, and I've really been loving the looks. Just a little bit more creativity with having different colors and not being quite so deep and dark as it is just sticking to this palette. If I'm wanting to do a bunch of looks, I feel like they tend to be a little bit darker than I prefer. So like I said, I can get some really awesome fall palettes, and then it's a great companion palette to get some really beautiful fall looks. So definitely wanted to recommend the new palette HalloBean from Shroud Cosmetics. All right, moving right along, another collab palette. Let's mention this one next. This is Adept Cosmetics and Heather Austin palette, or Adept Cosmetics collaborated with Heather Austin on this palette, and it's called the Heather Austin palette. But this palette right here is a really pretty palette and definitely makes me think of fall. You got those greeny tones down here with the mattes, but then also the other mattes in here are definitely like that kind of purple burgundy type of shade that's absolutely beautiful. It definitely makes me think of fall. And then the array of shimmers in here, it's just a very fall-esque type of palette. Maybe not super strong and super colorful when it comes to fall, but like a neutral fall. Absolutely, I see fall in this palette anytime that I open it. The looks that I did, thinking back over them, the looks that I've seen other people do with this palette, the looks that Heather Austin has done with this palette, it just all scream fall. So definitely had to mention this palette in my top 10. It's a great little palette. I have a full review on it. I wasn't the craziest fan of all the shimmers in this palette, but there are a couple that really steal my heart. I think there are 3 multi-chromes in this palette that I really did like, and then the mattes are beautiful. So nice to work with. So it's a gorgeous palette. Heather Austin did a fantastic job. So if you're looking for palettes that really scream fall, this is definitely one of them. Next up is going to be the Beaute Tropical Vibes palette, and I think I tried this like within a month of me doing the last year's fall palette, so I was really bummed that I couldn't include this, but this is absolutely a fall palette. Very grungy green to me, but still screams fall because all of these shadows, when you pair them and create looks together, just have that kind of fall tone to them that I absolutely love. So yes, definitely for me personally, this is a fall palette. These tones up here especially definitely scream fall. The greens, when you mix and match them into looks, are beautiful. The shimmer options in here are also really pretty. Yes, you can get a very kind of basic grungy green look with this, but if you kind of look around, there are those fall colors that just pop out, and you can get so many beautiful fall type of looks that I just had to include this in my top 10. And formula wise is, it's just such a beautiful palette. I rave about this palette all the time. I love the matte formula in this Beaute palette. It is gorgeous, so smooth, so beautiful. I have a multiple looks video on my channel if you want to see the type of looks that I created. The shimmers I remember being really nice, maybe not like blown out of the water type of nice, but there was only 3. They worked fine. I wasn't mad at them. There was no big issue, but I think if I remember correctly, they were a little hard to pick up, but still very beautiful once on, and only 3 of them. Mattes is really what stands out in this palette and just what sold it to me, and the thing that I look back fondly on and remember. I absolutely love this palette for the mattes, so definitely want to make sure I include in my top 10 for fall palettes for 2022. Another new palette that I discovered over the past year is going to be the newest palette from Nomad Cosmetics, the Hudson Valley palette. This palette came out not too long ago, but like look at this palette. This is just like, if you see the leaves changing, obviously if you just look at the cover, but if you see the leaves changing and whatnot in the mountains, this palette just kind of sums that up. It's more so into fall because there's not as much like super bright green, but you have all those beautiful tones of the mustard, the orange, the red, the gold. It's just beautiful. I have been having so much fun playing with this palette. The mattes in here are absolutely beautiful. The shimmers, there's only 3 in this palette, lots of mattes to play with, but the shimmers are also beautiful and almost that duochrome-esque. I'm not really sure if they're exactly duochrome, but depending on what shadows I'm pairing them with, I feel like they can kind of, lean a different color. Like this one looks very green, but I used it in a look and it looked a little bit more yellow with the colors that I paired it with and that type of thing. And then which shade was it? It was either this one or this one. I forget which one I put on, but this looks gold, this looks pink, but when I put it with the look, it looked very orange. I think it was the pink. Anyway, they have that kind of ability to adapt and kind of stand out in different lights with the different colors you pair it with. So I think that's absolutely beautiful and very unique with these shadows. And then the formulas are just absolutely beautiful. I love them. These are very soft, but they go on nicely. They pick up easy with a brush. And the matte formula is just chef's kiss. So easy to work with, so smooth, and just effortless to blend out. So definitely, I love Nomad's formula. This color story just screams fall to me, so I definitely wanted to include it in my top 10. Okay, and last up for my top 10 for fall, it's going to be the Blend Bunny Cosmetics Primal palette. Now this is a little bit more colorful fall, but still it is a very fall palette, because I think the biggest reason, this is like a rainbow fall palette for me, and the biggest reason is because there's so much depth with these tones, and especially with the shimmers. So with these shimmers, when I pair them with the tones in this palette, I feel like all of them just made me think of very rainbow grunge, and the depth that you got, or that you know, would get with your looks using this palette just made me think of the type of very depth and kind of grungy type of looks that I like to get in the fall. So yes, it is pretty bright in a rainbow, just an array of colors, but the tones that are in here, I just love the depth that you're able to get, and those are the kind of deep tones that I like to get in the fall and winter, but in the fall too, I absolutely love it. So this one is a little bit more of a stretch because it doesn't stick to that kind of like leaves changing, fall-esque in the air type of color story. This one, as I said, is definitely a rainbow palette, but it has those tones, that kind of depth to it, that grunge to it that I love to wear in the fall. So a colorful rainbow grungy type of fall palette. And maybe a little bit of a cheat, you can let me know. Of course, you don't have to agree with any of these top 10 that I mentioned. These are all top 10 for me personally and my preferences. So when I was reminding myself of that as I was picking out palettes, I was like, you know what, Katie, you like that palette, it makes you think of fall, we're gonna include it. So had to include this one. And then just touching briefly on the formula, it's a lovely formula. The mattes are really nice. I prefer working dark to light with her formula, and this palette specifically, just because I feel like it shows up best, and I've had issues when I do a light to dark. And then the shimmers are beautiful. It's got that depth in it, like I was saying, but still very sparkly, very smooth. They're not the easiest to put on, but they're very beautiful once you get them on. And overall, just a really nice palette, a really nice addition to Blend Bunny Cosmetics, but a really nice rainbow fall palette for me. Alright, so those are my top 10 fall palettes for 2022, and as I'm sitting here right now with you recording this, all of them you can still get and purchase if you are curious. I tried to make sure all of them were, like I said, still available for you to purchase, but I am going to be doing another video very, very soon where I share with you guys all the honorable mention type of fall palettes, and these are all going to be fall palettes that are either discontinued, they're from brands that are no longer available, or there were collab palettes that are no longer available, that type of thing. So definitely stay tuned for that. The Heather Austin and the Shroud Cosmetics HalloBean, I'm not sure how long those are going to be available because they are collab palettes, but as like I said, when I'm sitting down, I can still like see it available to buy, so that's why I'm including it in this video. But sorry if it's a couple months in the future and they're no longer available. But anyway, with that said, that is going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, I really appreciate you guys taking the time out of your day to watch this video of mine, and let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and let me know if you could only pick like 1 or 2 palettes out of your collection, which ones scream the most fall to you, which one just makes you think of fall. Let me know that down below in the comments. As always, I'm over on Instagram, LadyKatie92 over there, and I post reels, up close eye pictures, all that sort of thing. And with all that said, that's gonna do it for me, and I'll see you guys very soon in my next video. Bye guys.